A rocket is more than metal, wires, and fire. It's a vessel for hope. And in the early 1980s, that hope wore the name Challenger. NASA's Space Shuttle program had promised a new era, one where space travel would no longer be rare, but routine. The shuttle wasn't a one-time rocket. It was a ship designed to launch, return, and fly again. The beginning of what many believed would be a highway to the stars. Challenger became the workhorse of that dream. By 1986, it had already flown 9 missions, carrying satellites, scientific experiments, and astronauts into orbit. Each flight chipped away at the idea that space was unreachable. But mission STS-51L, the 10th flight of Challenger, was different. Because aboard that shuttle was not just a crew of astronauts, but a school teacher. Her name was Christa McAuliffe, a mother of 2 from New Hampshire, chosen from over 11,000 applicants to be the first civilian in space. She wasn't going up to run experiments or fix satellites. She was going to teach. 2 lessons, broadcast live from orbit to classrooms across the country. NASA hoped it would reignite the flame of curiosity in young Americans at a time when the space program was fighting to stay relevant. Christa represented something bigger than science or politics. She was the proof that space belonged to everyone. And so, as the launch date approached, excitement spread like wildfire. Schools prepared TVs. Families made plans to watch. For many children, it would be the first time they looked to the sky and saw their own future waiting there. January 28, 1986, Cape Canaveral, Florida. Dawn broke, cold and unforgiving. The shuttle stood tall on the launch pad, its white frame streaked with frost. For Florida, the temperature was brutal, just 28 degrees Fahrenheit, the kind of cold that bites through clothing and seeps into machinery. In the hours before liftoff, engineers worried. Ice clung to the launch tower. The shuttle's fuel lines and seals strained in conditions no one had tested for. But the world was watching. Challenger's launch had already been delayed, again and again. And now, the pressure was crushing. In Washington, officials pushed for liftoff. At NASA, managers worried about headlines and funding. We can't delay forever, some argued. Each postponement chipped away at the image of routine space travel. This mission needed to fly. And across the country, televisions flickered on. Nearly every school in America tuned in. Students gathered on gym floors and in classrooms, waiting for Christa McAuliffe to make history. For them, this was more than science. It was inspiration. At the Kennedy Space Center, families of the crew huddled in the chilled air, breath misting as they craned their necks toward the looming shuttle. Parents, children, and loved ones stood bundled in jackets, nerves hidden behind smiles. The astronauts themselves, inside Challenger's cockpit, prepared with practiced calm. Helmets on, checklists running, heart rates steady. They were professionals, but they were also human. And this launch, with the eyes of a nation fixed on them, carried a weight unlike any before. At 11:38 a.m., the countdown began to echo across the Cape. The engines roared to life, and the frozen ground trembled. The clock hit 0, and Challenger leapt from the pad. Flames and thunder shook the Cape as the shuttle clawed upward through the cold morning sky. For a moment, all the worries vanished. Families cheered. School children pointed at the televisions. On the ground, the roar of engines drowned out every doubt. Inside Mission Control, the flight director's voice cut steady and calm over the headsets. Numbers streamed across screens. The shuttle rose higher, faster. At 30 seconds, Challenger pierced the clouds, leaving a twisting contrail behind it. At 60 seconds, it was more than 10 miles above the Atlantic, pushing through the edge of the atmosphere. And then, at 73 seconds, everything changed. A burst of flame ripped through the side of the shuttle's fuel tank. The great white plumes split apart, twisting into a terrible Y shape in the sky. Challenger was gone. On the ground, there was confusion. Applause faltered. Teachers whispered to one another, not wanting to believe what they had seen. In classrooms across America, children stared in silence, unsure why their lesson had ended in fire. At NASA, flight controllers froze. For endless seconds, headsets crackled with static. Someone asked, "Flight, do we have any indication?" The only answer was silence. 73 seconds. That was all it took for the dream to become tragedy. The explosion was not the work of chance. It was the work of warning unheeded. In the days and weeks after Challenger's destruction, investigators combed through the wreckage, searching for answers. What they found was not a mystery, but a failure everyone should have seen coming. The culprit was small, a ring of rubber, known as an O-ring seal. Its job was simple, to keep burning rocket fuel contained inside the shuttle's solid boosters. But on that freezing January morning, the O-rings had stiffened. They couldn't expand fast enough to seal the gaps. Flames slipped through, and in less than a second, they tore Challenger apart. But the real tragedy wasn't the physics, it was the people. Engineers at Morton Thiokol, the company that built the boosters, had raised alarms the night before. They warned that temperatures were too low. They feared the seals would fail. Some pleaded with NASA to delay. Yet in late-night phone calls, under the weight of schedule and politics, those voices were overruled. Managers argued the evidence wasn't conclusive. Pressure built to keep the launch on track, and so the decision was made. Challenger would fly. The Rogers Commission, appointed by President Reagan, later uncovered the truth. They called it a failure of communication, a culture of silence. Engineers had spoken. Leaders had ignored them. Safety was sacrificed at the altar of image. The Challenger disaster was not born in the skies over Florida. It was born in the boardrooms the night before. In the hours after the explosion, the world stood stunned. News anchors struggled for words. Teachers shut off televisions in classrooms where children sat silent and wide-eyed. Across America, families wept with the crew's loved ones. That night, President Ronald Reagan addressed the nation. His speech, meant for the State of the Union, was rewritten in grief. He spoke not of politics, but of people. The crew of the Space Shuttle Challenger honored us with the manner in which they lived their lives. We will never forget them, nor the last time we saw them. This morning, as they prepared for their journey and waved goodbye, and slipped the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God. It was a moment of unity and sorrow, but mourning alone could not explain why. The Rogers Commission began its work almost immediately. What it found shook NASA to its core. Ignored warnings, suppressed concerns, and a culture more worried about public image than human life. The report did not mince words. Challenger was lost not because of a single accident, but because of systemic failure. The shuttle fleet was grounded for nearly 3 years. NASA was forced to confront its mistakes, to rebuild not only its technology, but its trust with the public. For the families, there was no comfort. For the nation, no quick healing. Challenger had burned a scar across American memory, one that would never fully fade. The Challenger disaster did more than end 7 lives. It reshaped the way we dream about space. NASA grounded the shuttle program for nearly 3 years. Every system, every procedure, every assumption was torn apart and rebuilt. Safety was no longer a slogan, it became survival. The culture of silence that doomed Challenger was forced into the light. When the shuttles finally flew again, the memory of January 28th lingered in every launch. Engineers carried it, astronauts carried it, the nation carried it. And yet, from tragedy came determination. Christa McAuliffe never taught her lessons from orbit, but her story inspired thousands of young people to chase careers in science, teaching, and exploration. The Teacher in Space program ended, but her legacy became every student who looked to the stars and believed they might reach them one day. Challenger's wreckage lies buried beneath Cape Canaveral, sealed in hidden silos of earth and silence. But its shadow still rises with every rocket that leaves the launch pad. Because Challenger was not simply a shuttle lost, it was a reminder that ambition must be tempered by caution, that progress is fragile, and that even the smallest, overlooked flaw can unravel the brightest of dreams. In the end, Challenger's crew did not fall in vain. They became part of the long, painful lesson of exploration, a lesson humanity will carry every time it dares to reach for the sky. History is not only written in victories, it is carved into our failures, our missteps, our tragedies. The Challenger disaster reminds us that even the boldest dreams can falter if we forget the weight of caution. And here, in the dusty ledger, we turn those pages, so that what was lost is not forgotten, and what was learned is carried forward. Because the past is never truly past. It lingers.